Hi, let's go through the rest of the stages for this WeatherCow. So we're going to go through retopology, we're going to go through UVing, we're going to put it in Substance Painter, we're going to paint it, and we're going to put it in Sketchfab. We're going to do all of this in this video. So this is what we got up to last time. I wouldn't call it finished. I could do some more things, but we're going to leave it. And this is what we're going to use for essentially to take forward. Now I'm going to take all of this and I'm just going to group everything, or rather I'm just going to take everything that's in my outliner. I'm going to press Ctrl G. I'm going to group this and call it Model Dev. Then I want to take the body and really everything that's in here, and I want to duplicate it with Ctrl D and then Shift P. I'm going to press Shift P on my keyboard, and that's going to separate it all out. Now I could take a long time to organize this and name this. For the sake of this video, I'm only going to take the body and the hat. And that's the only thing I'm going to work at, so that you don't have to sit through a very long time of me doing everything. And I have these two, and I think the body I didn't even duplicate. Shift P. There we go. Actually, let me undo that. Let's hide our original. Thank you. There we go. Now, we have the head and the body. Let's hide the hat and let's just do the body. Alright, so let's say you're finished with your modeling, you're done with the body. What do we do next? First thing you do, you select it, you make sure you're in normal mode. Oops, that was the wrong button. Make sure you're in normal mode, you press 1 on your keyboard. And then you want to go to mesh and you want to go smooth. Right? And now you're going to get a little pop-up that says divisions. Go until the difference between the two starts being indistinguishable. So the difference between 3 and 4 is indistinguishable. 2 and 3, a little more noticeable. For the sake of time, I'm actually going to just go to 2, just so that I'm not here too long. But I would recommend going to 3 and then working from there. Let's go to 2. And now we can select our model and go edit, delete by type history, just so we get rid of that little box. Okay, so what do we do now? Now we need to go through and reduce the resolution of this asset. We need to take away all the lines that don't really do anything. So for example, a lot of this detail is probably going to come through with the normal map, and any details that do not retain the main shape of the model can be removed. So for example, I think I can probably remove this detail and this detail. This detail I'll retain, and I think long ways. Actually, let's do this. Bada bang, like that. Control delete, and you don't see a difference. Down here we have way too many. This one we don't need. This one we'll get rid of as well because we can get that from the normal map. This one we don't need, and I think we can remove. Let's retain these ones for curvature, and I'll just. No. We'll do this. These will go all the way down. And now I've selected only individual ones. I'm going to hold Control, right click, to edge loop, Control delete. Alright. And I need to go through the entire model and remove the edges that don't do anything. And let's select these ones. To edge loop utilities, to edge loop. Does this go through anything I want to retain? I don't think so. Control delete. I believe it's still alright. At the top here I have quite a few, but they create this little bend here, so I want to retain that. Going downwards we have quite a few here, so let's try and get rid of a few of them. We do not need all of them. These go around. Control delete. There we go. And these ones to go down, of course. Oh, and I made a mistake here. I didn't use symmetry when deleting these ones down here. So I'm going to have to do that. So let me go to World X, and these are here. So I know that it's like this one and this one that I wanted to remove. And I think that's fine. Alright, so now let's start working in symmetry. Let's remove this and this as well. And just make sure it's not deleting anything that we definitely need. Keeping an eye on it when it actually does it. So notice we're going to lose this detail. So we need to figure out how to retain that. If that means that we don't delete this and we delete something else instead, there might be a way to do it. This one we can definitely remove. It wasn't doing much. But we want to retain this detail. These two details. So what we can do is we can create a triangle. And I've been telling you a lot that triangles are not good, and they're not, but in certain situations they're permitted because they allow you to essentially make the model better. So down here we should get another triangle like this, right? And we can just move this sideways a bit, and this as well we can move sideways a bit. And the rest of these we can just, instead of removing the edges or whatever, we can actually, no, we're gonna remove the edges. We're gonna remove the edges. Control delete. And now we have this, which is a bit better. Move this back like that. There, and we've retained that detail, but we've reduced the edges as well. This one I'm not sure about. Where does this go? Goes around here, down the side. We get a change in the silhouette. A little bit. We can do the same effect here. Let us grab our target world, and that will go up to here. But we kind of want to get rid of the ones down here because the tail has too many. So what we can do is we can go to the tail like this and just do that. That should be okay. So in certain situations, it is permitted to have triangles. The reason we don't like having triangles, let me change this to surface slide. The reason we don't like having triangles is that they make animation a bit difficult, they make modeling a bit difficult, they make UVing and a bunch of stuff just a slight pain in the butt. Edit mesh, collapse, those are going to connect all the way down. The body we could probably remove one or two. It does change the silhouette a little bit at the top. What about this one? Yeah, much less change there. And we have this going down here. So I'm gonna leave the rest of this. Actually the neck, I can't leave the neck, there's too much. There we go, to edge loop, to edge loop, to edge loop, to edge loop. Oh, I need to turn off symmetry for that to work. Let's do that again. With symmetry, sometimes the edge loop doesn't go all the way around. There we go. This one, perhaps this one I can remove. Yeah, that's okay. And then I would go through here and I would delete quite a few, making sure there's a few in the middle where the knee would be. But there are way too many here at the moment. I'm just looking to see where we should start from. Perhaps from there would be fine. Oh, there's so many. You can even select 2 at a time, if not more. We don't need this. We'll keep that one. And we can remove these, right? This little one. And oh, thank God, symmetry. Remembered in time. To edge loop, control delete. All right, so there we go, that's much lower. And we'll do this, and then we'll move on to UVing. There's quite a lot here because of the knee and the detail that I was putting there. Keep one of those. To edge loop, delete. And I believe that is everything that we need to reduce. We could reduce the tail a bit more, but as it stands, this model is only 3,000 polys. When you get all the clothing and everything in there as well, it's gonna be barely anything once more. I suppose certain things like this actually we should fix, just for good practice, to show that we know how. All right. Did that mess it up quite a bit? Let's keep that one. Let's just do these two. All right. So when we add all the clothes and everything else, this model probably won't go above 10,000. Maybe it might go above to 15,000. I don't see it going above 15,000. It's not detailed enough. The clothing isn't detailed enough. We can bring back our hat as well. And usually I say if you're never gonna see it, delete it. but the bottom of the hat, this is a character, maybe you do some animation where the hat goes up like this, so I'm keeping it there. Now let's UV this character. How do you UV? Okay, let's open our UV editor, and I'm going to keep my symmetry on. Select our cow, and we're going to go to our usual planar and camera based, right? So we can see it more clearly here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut apart the limbs on this character. So I'm going to cut apart the legs, probably from a little lower down, probably from somewhere like here and here. So I'm going to remove those, Shift X. Those are separate. I'm also going to remove these caps at the bottom. There we go. Then we want to cut off the tail. Sounds a bit brutal, but that's what we're doing. Remove the tail, and we could cut off the cap for the tail as well. I suppose we could do that. Shift X. Oops. Let's leave that like that for now. I'm wondering. Yeah, let's leave that like that for now. We need to separate the head most likely from the neck. So we could do this. Actually, let's do it one further, like that. Right where it connects. We'll leave the head for now, and the body is separate. So let's separate them and see how badly they unfold. And actually, I don't even need to do that yet, because before we do that, we should cut the insides of the legs. And you do the insides of the legs because that's where it's least visible that you've cut it. All right. And now we can unfold those just to preview. Excellent. I'm going to make sure that I've frozen my transformation and deleted history. I'm just going to unfold these again. Yeah, they're fine. Let's unfold our little hooves. Excellent. The head, or actually let's do the tail first. It's a little easier. We can just cut it in the middle. And let's make sure we only go to here. So only this area. Shift X. Unfold. We have a little tail here. Our body is a bit trickier. So again, so you don't see it, we're going to go from the bottom and we're going to go all the way back up to the tail. And actually that even went the wrong way. Let's do it down to here. Select this. Then we want from here to here. Let's cut that and unfold that and see how it looks. Okay, it looks like this. Let's check our stretching. There's quite a bit of stretching. Because this is quite a complex shape. It's not the worst. It's not the worst, honestly, because this is going to be a stylized character and we're going to texture in a stylized way. If we wanted to, we could do some support cuts here so that when we, or actually, probably better to have support cuts on the inside here so that these can open up more easily and they're not going to make a big difference. And let's unfold that. So those are going to open. We have this little issue here now where we have these really thin UVs, which kind of you don't want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually combine the legs with this area. So I'm going to cut these parts of the model here, right? And then I'm going to sew these parts so that actually, and now it looks a bit crazy, but let's grab our legs, unfold, right? So they just have some extra bits to them now, and let's unfold this, and it has fewer little cuts and creases. Now again, we still have this big red bit because we have these big hunched shoulders and the hunched bottom. So let's try and see whether we can amend this. And if we can't, I'll just leave it, and we'll see the result in Substance Painter, which is, you know, a good technique. I've often had to just jump between Substance Painter and Maya and make adjustments so that I can get better bakes. So unfold this. And now it's unfolding quite a lot, and it clearly wants to separate here, so I'm just going to separate it here. We can do this because we're working in Substance Painter, so we can afford to do more drastic cuts. Usually you want to have as few cuts in your model as possible, but because we're working in Substance Painter and it has a very good tool set, we can afford to be a little less careful in that regard. Let's just cut this so it's separate. There we go. That's way better. These seem to be alright. I think the head is the only one that's left. The head is a bit tricky. The head is a bit tricky because it's such an interesting shape. So let's try cutting it in several places. Let's try cutting it just like this first and see the result. Shift X, unfold. Yeah, as I expected. The head wants to be opened up, kind of like Frankenstein style. Let's just separate the head for the moment. Okay, that's a little better. And the front of the face wants to be separated as well. You can just tell. Now it's going to be unfolded and it's going to open up like this. There's a bit of stretching here that's just unavoidable. And we have a bit of stretching on the front of the face, which we don't really want. It's not ideal, but it's just how it is at the moment. We'll have to, thankfully, again, as I keep saying, Substance Painter has a lot of tools which forgive a lot of this. And I'm just going to cut out the middle of the nostrils. It just makes it a little easier to do. And actually, that didn't even make a big difference, so I'm going to put them back. Okay, so I think that should be fine for the body. It's not ideal, it's not perfect. If I wasn't relying on Substance Painter's tools, I would probably fiddle around with it quite a bit more. But let's actually lay it out. We'll put the hat in as well. We'll prepare for Substance Painter. We'll put it in. We'll see what happens. So let's lay this out. Lay this out. Lay this out. That's what I want to say. Now this isn't a great layout because there's a lot of wasted space. So what I would try to do is actually use all of this space. I would try to make all the bits point in the right direction so that they're all pointing in the same way up. Right? We have this top of the head, which I feel really weird about removing. But this character has a hat, actually, so it's a bit justified. We have this, which is the face. This, which is the body. I'm going to rotate that like that. It's tricky. It's tricky, this one. It's a very peculiar shape because it's so large. And sometimes you get in this situation where actually it laid it out as best as it possibly could and you're just going to fiddle around with it pointlessly for ages. That is a possibility, so I'm not going to spend too long here. Part of me wants to rotate this sideways, and I might. I'm trying to do it normally for now though. You know, I'm just going to leave it for now because I'd fiddle around with it and try to make sure I'm not wasting space. Essentially, this whole space is wasted. The only thing I will do actually before I leave it is I will straighten out these leg things, just because there's no reason for them to be quite like this. There we go. And I think there's enough. Is there enough space between them? I believe so. This is pretty close. Pull this up slightly. This is, I mean, that's as close as it can get, really. Let's just leave it. Let's just leave it, go in Substance and see what we got. Because you could fiddle all day, and at the end, you might end up knowing that you didn't need to. Let's leave it like that. Let's do the hat as well. Let's do the hat. Hat's quick. I would recommend keeping your whole character on one sheet, or at least keeping the body, the ears, the eyes, and all that stuff on one sheet, but the clothing on a separate sheet, right? So a separate UV sheet. So your clothes on one sheet, your body on a separate sheet. Just so you could do either way if you're actually working on a game. It depends on the game, but for you guys, I just want you to get used to working on a character that actually uses 2 different UV sheets. So let us UV this really quickly. And cut it here, 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 and cut it here. Shift X. Separate this. Oh, I need to look at the thingies. Hide the body. I need to cut it by selecting these as well. Done. There we go. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Cut it on the inside as well. And we're cut. And then this should be separate now. Yep. And I think I could probably sew that there as well. Alright, Control U, done. I believe it's done. Let me get rid of this white thing as well. This is fine, this is fine, this is fine. Okay, I'm just gonna lay them out. I'm not worried too much for this tutorial to show you proper layout techniques. I've done that quite a bit, but again, if someone needs support, you know what to do. There we go, just make sure we're using enough space. Okay, so I think we're done with the UVing. I'm just going to call this body UV and hat UV. And I'm going to put them in a group. I'm going to call them UV'd. Right? And there we go. So now I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to hide the UV'd ones. And these ones I'm going to call substance. Right? So what we need to do for substance, we need to make sure the transformations are frozen. We want to keep them in the same place. I want my high poly as well. So I'm going to grab my high poly cow and I'm going to duplicate it. Nope, that's not it. High poly one. Duplicate it, take it out of the group, hide our high poly scene. And I'm going to call this one hat low. And I'm going to call this body low, right? Now I'm going to grab the high resolution one and call it body underscore high. And I'm going to do what I did before. I'm going to go to modify, apologies, mesh, smooth, and I'm going to bring it up to like 4, just so it's really smooth. And the high resolution, as I've said many times, does not need UVs. Your high resolution does not need UVs. Your low does, your high doesn't. All right. Okay, so we have this. I'm going to hide the high for a moment. I'm going to select the low, the body. I'm going to hold right click, and right down here at the bottom, you have material options. So if you click assign new material, you're going to get this window that gives you a bunch of materials that are in Maya. You don't need that really, because what you can do is you can hold right click and go to assign existing material, and this shows you all the materials that are already in the scene. So by default, all models use Lambert 1. But what we want is to create a new material for the body, and you will find out why as the video progresses. So you want to go to assign favorite material, and this is going to assign a new material, but it's giving you a short list of all the ones that you often use, and we use Lambert quite often as just a test material. So I'm going to assign a favorite material Lambert to the body. Now it may look like nothing happened, but in your attribute editor, this window pops up, and here you have a bunch of things associated with your model. But at the very end, you have your material. And if you can't see it, just right click on this little window and you find it right at the bottom. You don't have to clicking until the end. Now, here you can see this is called Lambert Free. That's what we just created for the body. And if we change the color slider or click it and change the color, it's going to change the color. And I'm going to add a red to this just so I can tell that it's a separate material. And I'm going to call this cow underscore body. Actually, I'm going to call it m underscore cow underscore body. So material cow body. And I'm going to leave that. And for the hat, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to assign a favorite material Lambert, and I'm going to call this m underscore cow underscore hat, right? Or actually, let's call this cloves. And this one, let's leave it as body, right? So this should be cloves, because if you're making a whole costume, all of your costume will probably use this one material. And if you're making the body, the tail, the ears, the eyes, the everything, all of that would go on the body material, right? And again, this will make sense in a short moment. So let's make this light blue. just so we can see the difference. Right, so here's our model prepared for Substance Painter and our high poly as well. So I'm going to actually select both of the lows, like both of them, and I'm gonna and not the high poly, just both of the lows, and I'm gonna make sure they're frozen in the same place as the high poly. Make sure they're in the same place. Select both of the lows. File, export selection. We want to go down to FBX export, and we want to go to geometry and click the first one and the third one. So smoothing groups and tangents and binormals, right? Then at the bottom we want to make sure animation is turned off, and all of these other things we can turn off as well because we don't need them. And I believe that is it. I'm going to put it on the desktop just for ease of access, and I'm going to call this cow for substance. Not the best name, but works for the moment. Export that. And I'm going to call this one file. I'm going to export this one as well, the high poly. Same FBX settings. I'm going to put it on the desktop, and I'm going to call this cow body high. Right? Export selection. That's going to export the high poly body. I'm just going to make sure that I actually froze the transformations for it as well, and then just re-export it just to make sure. Okay, so we did that, and now we're ready to go into Substance Painter. We modeled our model, we fixed its topology, we UV'd it, it's in the same place as the high poly, and we separated the different parts of our model by groups, by material groups. Let's go to Substance Painter. Open up Substance Painter, go to New, and then select the template. We are going to be showing these in Sketchfab. We're going to be showing this in Sketchfab. So I think as long as you go to PBR, either PBR metal roughness or non-PBR. Go to non-PBR. We'll try this. We'll try non-PBR. And click and select your file. So click select and find your file. You want to go to desktop, the right desktop, and you want to click your cow for substance, your low polys. Open that up and click OK. And you're going to get this fella, this lovely little guy, or girl, it's a cow after all. And then we want to bake its maps. We're going to bake its map. But before that, let me explain what's going on here in Substance Painter. So I've had an introduction to it already, but just as another quick recap, you have two windows. You have your 3D view, and it's Maya controls, so it controls like Maya. And you have your 2D window, which is your UVs, right? And if you press the F buttons, you can switch between the windows. I'm not going to do that because I've made my F buttons be whether I start or stop recording, so I'm going to leave those alone. But F1, 2, 3, 4 is going to change between these views. Now on the side here, you have all these windows, and it's really unorganized, right? So what you want to do is you want to just grab your layers window and drag it to your texture set list. And now they're both of them here. And then you want to grab your texture set settings and drag them to your properties. And now you just have two windows to worry about. You have your layers and texture sets, and you have your texture settings and your properties, right? So your layers are where you actually add layers of paint that allow you to change the color and stuff. While your, let me delete this, remove. While your texture set list is your groups. And look, they're called M-Cow Body, M-Cow Clothes. So these are literally the groups that we created in Maya by giving models different materials. So when you give a model separate materials inside of Maya and export them as a single object, as a single FBX, when you go to Substance Painter and import that object, it's going to get separated into separate objects, into separate groups. And when you export your textures, it's going to export separate textures for each of the groups. And this means that you can select both of these models, even though their UVs are overlapping, as long as they're actually separate groups, and export them together. And this is useful if you have a character like this that's going to be made up of multiple parts, the body and the clothes. So all the body on one sheet, all the clothes on another sheet. Okay? Down here you have your properties. So if you're painting or changing some other stuff in here, this is the window you're going to use, this is the window you're going to change the colors and a lot of other things. And your texture set settings are essentially preparation for texturing. So what we want to do here, the very first thing is you're going to go to texture set settings, and we want to go to the body, and we want to bake mesh maps. And then here we're going to leave it at 1024 for the texture size. And then we're going to click this little thingy for a high definition mesh. This is where we put in our high poly. I'm going to click this, and I'm going to select cow body high. And then these are all ticked. I'm just going to click bake M cow body mesh maps. Not all, just this one, right? And this is going to do some calculation, and what it's done now, it's essentially baked the high resolution detail onto the low poly. Now there wasn't a much big difference between the two, apart from the fact that one was smoother. But why do we do this? We do this for a few reasons. One, it is a bit smoother, but two, it also populates this texture set settings with all of these maps. It's generated them, and we can use these whilst we're texturing to get some really cool effects, right? Now let's switch to our clothes, and you notice they don't have it because they're a separate map. So we need to go to bake mesh maps, and we need to remove the body because we're baking just the hat, not the body. But we don't have a high poly for the map for the hat. So what do? Well, you still have to bake them, but instead of putting a high poly in, you just tick this little box. Use low poly mesh as high poly mesh. We're going to tick that, and we're going to bake just for the hat. It's going to be a bit quicker, and we're not going to have all the and we're not going to have all the maps as high detail or with any specific additional details. It's just going to take the low poly and turn it into a high poly so that it can create this and populate this like we did for the body. Now, let's start texturing the body, and there's several things that we can do for this. Now, first we need to go to layers, and we need to add a base color for the body, right? And let me just grab my Wacom pen so I can start. Oh, I think my tablet is upside down. My tablet is upside down. Let's turn it around. Okay, so let's start painting now that we've set up our character. Now, first thing we want to do is we want to add a base color. So we're going to come here to layers, and we're going to click this little paint bucket. This is going to add a solid layer with a color inside. If you go to your properties, you can change the properties of this color, right? So this fill layer can change a lot of things. It can change the diffuse color, it can change specular, gloss, and height, normal and emissive, which are all different kinds of maps that we can use for this character. For this character, we're just going to use color. We're going to make a stylized character that only uses color. It's not going to use normal maps, it's not going to use other stuff, it's just going to use color. And then you ask, okay, so why did we make this high resolution mesh so that we're not going to use normal maps? We're still going to use the maps to create the color. And here's what that means. So first, let's create a base color for this cow. I have no plan for this, I apologize. So I'm just gonna make some kind of weird, cool purple cow or something. Or come on, let's try. Let's give it some kind of like orangey for. Let's do something bright. And right now, you know, it looks kind of solid color. That's fine. I want to switch our material here. So if you click here, you're on material mode, so you're seeing everything. You also get a list of all the different types of things that you can preview. So if you want to see just the height information, you can click height. There's none right now. If you want to see just the normal information, you can click that. There's no normal information right now. Let's scroll further down, and now you can see the mesh maps. So these ones are the ones that we baked here. So if you want, you can just preview what they look like. So let's see the normal mesh map. This is what it looks like. You can see the curvature mesh map, and this is what it looks like. So I want to go all the way to the top, and I want to just see the diffuse, the base color. I'm going to click that. And this is what it looks like. So if we exported our character's textures right now, this is what it would look like, right? Because we have just one single solid color. Now I'm going to select this color and duplicate it. Go back to my properties. I'm going to duplicate it with Control D, and I'm going to just change the color slightly to something a bit darker. Then I'm going to right click this, and I'm going to add a black mask. Now a black mask is just like masks in Photoshop. It defines where you see the layer, and I put a black one so that you can't see it anywhere. Now I'm going to right click this layer, this black mask, and I'm going to add a generator. And a generator is like an effect, and there's a lot of different effects you can have. You could do some, you know, rust or dirt or whatever, but that's not the kind of model that we're making. We're making a stylized model. So what I'm gonna add first is a curvature. And a curvature is gonna use that map that you just saw to essentially highlight the edges of the model. And you get these little, after you select curvature, you get these little sliders and things that can change where you see it. Now I'm going to invert it, and I'm going to now play with it a bit more to try and make sure I can get something interesting. Now I think the very big ones, I'm thinking, oh, actually, let's increase the brightness a bit. No, I don't want to invert it. Let me undo the invert. There we go. We'll keep it like that, and then I can play with it a bit more. So these are just changing which of the details you see in the curvature. You can do stuff like this. Now, it doesn't look amazing, and certain areas are quite dark, right? But we're gonna leave it just for a moment, so that I can show you some more things. Now let's duplicate this again, and let's select the actual color, and change the color again to something a bit darker, something darker like black. And let's go back to our curvature generator, and let's just exit, get rid of that, and let's create another generator. And this one's going to be called world space. And this is going to use some of the normal maps you made to create this, which is a top-down shadow. Now we want it to go from the bottom up, so I'm going to open up the options down here and click invert. And now you have a shadow coming from below. And it looks quite interesting. It looks like those games that you play that are top-down that create a dark shadow from the bottom so you can see it a bit clearly. Now I'm going to make this a little bit, no blur, we don't want blur because it's going to show our seams, see? So I'm going to increase the balance a bit, don't want too strong contrast, and then I'm going to right-click on this, on the mask that we're working on, and I'm going to add a filter. And I'm going to click this filter button, and I'm going to add a contrast. And then I can increase the contrast a bit and reduce the luminosity. And this is going to blend it with the color that's underneath it. So if I go back to that very first base color, whatever I change it to, it's going to blend that, dark color that we overlaid with the color below it. So it's going to look a little bit softer. Now let's go back to this curvature we made. It's a bit naff, isn't it? Let's remove that. And you can see that if we remove the curvature, it's kind of like, it's just a much better effect just without the curvature, isn't it? But we can still utilize it a little bit. So let's add this terrible curvature that we have here. And then let's go onto the mask and add a paint. So all of these separate things can be toggled on and off separately. So on this paint layer, we're going to do some painting. We can select our brush. We can go to brushes, and we can grab one of these artistic brushes. And here I'm going to turn my flow down really low to something like 24 or 30. And with the X button, you can, whilst painting on a mask, you can change between painting black and white. So white is going to make it appear, black is going to remove it, right? So I'm going to paint with black, and I'm just going to remove large parts of these very dark areas, right? Do something like this, just to get rid of a lot of this dirtiness that we have around the model. And I'm just going to give this a go a little bit just to see if I can tidy it up a bit. And if I don't get the effect I want, I'm just going to remove it, right? Because curvature is usually used more on assets like clothing or props. So we might try on the hat, but if this looks terrible, I am going to remove it because I don't want to spend too long on it. So I'm just removing some of these much darker. And also we can go to our opacity for the curvature and turn that down a little bit, so the effect isn't as strong. And you still get a little bit around here, around the face. So if I turn that on and off, you can see it's completely clear, and now we're getting a bit more of effect. So I think the curvature is a bit important. We just need to like tone it down a little bit. Let me lower my flow even more because I want to be quite light in my removals here. Especially, see where we put that edge on the shoulders, how it's giving us some issues. So we need to be, that's why you need to be careful about where you put your UV edges. Even though we're in Substance Painter, it still gave us some issues. All right, so I'm getting rid of these hard edges. And then we're going to do something to make them even more natural of a transition. Alright, just tone this down a bit. Yeah, here as well, look at the back of these. Let's tone these down a bit. And this is all just working with the curvature. And I'm going to show you the before and after so you can see whether it's worth it or not. I like adding it because it actually creates a bit of detail. I rarely add it on a character's body, to be honest. But it seems like it's actually quite going to be useful here, and we'll see in a moment how true that is. Let's rotate this, right? So before previewing it, I did some changes, so it's a bit, oh, this is a bit weird. And here we can tone that down a bit. And here we can tone that down a bit. Okay, so before checking it, I'm going to right-click this mask, and I'm going to add a filter to this one as well. But this time I'm just going to add a blur. And I'm just going to blur it a little bit. Not too much, just a little bit, right? And now if I turn the curvature on and off, you're going to see that it does remove some quite useful highlight details that makes you see the big curvatures. That's why it's called a curvature map on the model. Okay, and some of these are still a bit strong, I think. I could tone down a smidge. And let's take off our world space, see the difference there. Yeah, so this is our world space as well. I'd even say probably do the world space before you do the curvature because it's more important. Now we did the curvature. Let's add just one more. So let's duplicate this again and change our color to, it's already on something dark. So let's make it something darker again though. And I'm just going to click add black mask again, and that's going to remove all of the other stuff we had on there. Add another generator, and this one I'm going to call light. And this is going to light the model from a certain direction, and you can change the direction of that with this angle, vertical angle, right? And if I turn this on and off, ooh, actually we're doing light, aren't we? We're doing highlight. So let me choose a brighter color. And let me do this again. Let me change the angle. So we don't want it to be pointing that. We want it, there we go. We want a top-down highlight, right? And we can then, let's actually adjust the settings a bit. So adjust how sharp it is with the glossiness. Highlight level, this is like quite, you can do a cell shade thing that way. And light attenuation, I don't know what this means, but I'm gonna use it to reduce it just a teeny bit, 0.04, super teeny bit, right? And now we can go back and change our color again. And notice we're still in diffuse. We're just in base color, but you can see all these details, right? So that's why we bake our maps, because all of these little generators that we're creating in curvature and that, if you scroll to the bottom, it tells you which map it's using. And it's using all these curvatures and normals that we baked from our texture set settings. So let's go back up to this color and just change the color a little bit so it's more relevant. Let's make it yellow, very bright yellow, like this, and I'm just going to turn it down. And this is just for me. This is just for my character. Yours is going to be different, most likely. Now this character has a hat, right? So this hat is probably going to do some shadowing. So now let me name these. So this is world space, this is curvature, and this is light. And I'm gonna create another one that's going to be dark. And actually, to be fair, I should just duplicate one of the existing ones. So probably I'll use the world space because it's a good color. Give it a black mask. Give that black mask a paint. And now I can come in here, just like before, and I'm gonna paint in some dark areas. And I want to be able to see under the hat, so I'm gonna actually hide the hat for a moment. And by going to texture settings and clicking the little eye. And now again on this new layer I'm going to just paint dark quite strongly. Let me make this bigger. That was a right click there to get that menu up. And let's do something like this, and you might be like, wow, this is too much, like what are you doing? Just give it a second, give it a second. And now let me bring back the hat because I want to see what's going on under here. We want to kind of darken a lot of it and give it a bit of a thing here. Because the hat will give you a shadow, won't it? And what we're doing is, you're not going to get any lighting information if you're just using diffuse. You're not going to get any shadows, you're not going to get any stuff like that. You need to make them yourself. This is what's called unlit textures. And in unlit textures, you don't get any shadow calculation, anything like that. They're very efficient, they're very useful for mobile and stuff like this, and they're just sometimes very pretty because they're a cool art style. But you need to create all of these bottom shadows, top highlights, and extra shadows yourself. Right? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the blur filter. I'm going to increase it a lot. Right? And then I'm going to reduce the opacity overall. And this is the effect. Very, very subtle. You don't want to be able to notice it. You don't want your viewer to be noticing the fact that it works. But it's just going to make them think it works a bit better. Because right now, it looks like it has no hat, right? You just want to make sure they know it works. And you can still come back and change the color to something if you want it to be just like a little bit less dark or something, or a little bit more colorful. Chromatic is the word when it's more towards the color. Right? So there we go. That's the start of the body. You can carry on, and we can group all of these. We group all of these. And so let's group these ones that we made and create a group and just drag them inside it. And we're going to call this group values, because if we turn off our base color, they still have these values. Or rather, if we select our base color and make it white, they still have these values, right? So our base color is separate. In these values, gosh, I just want to show you one more, and I'm going to delete it afterwards because I don't want it. But I want to show you just one more before I move on. Make it black, black mask, generator, and let's do ambient occlusion. And I believe that is here, ambient occlusion. And that's going to do this at first, so we want to invert it. And now we can change how much this AO is visible. Open up our thingies, change the balance so that it opens a lot more. And if you're doing some really hard comic book style stuff that we're doing on one of our projects, you can do this, and then you can add the filter for contrast. And then you can increase the contrast and reduce the luminosity, and you can get like a bit of a comic-y thing, or you can keep it dark and do like a comic book thing. But this is not what that is, so I'm going to remove that because I don't need it. Now, as I said before, we have this paint here that I did for the thing, right? So you can additionally go in and carry on painting stuff. And if I was doing this more long term, I would probably like go through and paint certain things on the legs and other things, and if I have other clothing. But yeah, okay, let's move on from values, go back to our color, and let's add a group actually and call it base colors, or rather just color, or yeah, just colors. And this is our base, right? And I'm going to duplicate this base just so you know it's quick. And I'm going to make something dark like this, and I'm going to add a black mask to it, and I'm going to add a paint to this black mask, and I want to paint it on the hooves. But I don't want to paint the hooves by hand. It's a pain. So I'm going to go back here to the side, and right now we're on the brush, right? I'm going to go to this selection thing, and here you can select the faces you want that to occur to. You can also drag select like this. So I can drag select on the hoof. On the side here, you choose what value you're painting into the mask. So right now I'm painting 1. If I go to 0, I'm painting 0, so I'm removing. Here you also have these little extras. This is triangles, so you can paint individual triangles of a face. You also have shape, object, so you can just click the whole object. And you have this, which is you can select individual UVs. I'm going to click on the face one. I'm going to go here, here, here. And then I'm going to add a blur filter to it. And increase that a little bit, just a little bit. And actually, no, I'm going to add a directional blur directional. I'll increase that a little bit, and I'm going to point it upwards, 90, right? Reduce the intensity a bit. And you can see that it's like, it's not coming through 100%, it's missing some of the bits there. So what we can do is we can just come in with our paint and just make it one more higher, just to make sure that it actually catches it properly. And we can do this from here as well. I don't need to like struggle to catch it from there. I think this will work better. There we go. And let me grab these ones as well. Do I need to go all the way over? Yeah, let's go all the way over. It'll be fine. We'll just reduce our blur if we need to. Now I'm making this character, you know, yellow. Please do it however your design is supposed to be. You know, if it looks quite a lot like the one I use for these tutorials, you know, I'm not gonna slate you for it, but I would like you to make your own. Try and make your own design. I don't want to have like 5 characters that all look exactly the same at the end. I'm gonna do a quick check that I'm still recording. I am. Great. Okay, how's that now? Go back to our brush so we can see. Yeah, it's not so bad. Let's reduce that blur. Now that we're going over, yeah, just a little bit. That's a little better. And we can just go on top of this if we like. We can just duplicate this base color, make it a bit of a highlight, add a black mask, do some painting. It's just about combining colors and masks and stuff. And we can add like hand paint some highlights here. Here as well, we can just hand paint some highlights. We can then like make them, like reduce them a little bit. We can paint on the model itself, and even though we have a seam here, we can paint through the seam. There's a lot of different things you can do with hand painting here, or if you wanted to, you could even create alphas for yourself. And if you remember, alphas are just solid objects, so you could create in Photoshop or Paint or whatever, you could create a pattern for like a cow spot or something like that, and then you could let's do that. Let's do a white spot or something. Turn off all these other layers. Add a black mask, add a paint to that mask. Now let's choose a brush. Any brush will do. Let's just get a hard brush. And then go to alphas. And if you scroll down on the brush, you have alpha here. And you can pick any of these alphas and put them on. So I'm just going to pick a random one that's kind of barely looks like a cow spot. Let's go for this one. Right, and now it's using that alpha. You can make that bigger. And you can increase the spacing as well, and you can just click, and it's gonna make it. I'm gonna take off size pressure, make it bigger, and then go pop, 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 pop. Right. This is quite a blurry alpha actually. So you know when you get a sharp alpha, you can do that. So if you create yourself some stuff like that, you can do that. And let's just as an example show you. Let's say that this is the way it's supposed to look. We can add a filter. We can add a bevel. We can bevel it in a direction, I believe. We can do an angular bevel. We can smooth it, distance. I haven't used bevel before, to be honest. But you can use filters to adjust what you're doing, or you can just go in here and duplicate it, delete these two, give yourself another paint, change this color, some darker, and you can go back here to paint. You can just grab a normal brush, something artistic, make it smaller, and you can like paint on top of it or underneath it or whatever, and then you can like reduce that, and you can add a filter and you can blur it. So like you have all these tools, right? You have all these tools, you can use them to your heart's content. What I'm doing with this right now, I have no idea. I'm gonna just delete that. I don't know what I'm doing there. But essentially you have all these tools for painting, for coloring. You can create these base generators in the values and have this, you know, effect. I mean, look, if I remove that, it's just solid color, right? So you can give yourself a base to work with. And this is just the body. Imagine when you have the rest of the character and the rest of the clothing. Let's move on to the clothes just for a moment, and I'll be quite quick with this, and I'll do something quite similar. I'm just gonna add a solid color. This is gonna be a green hat, and you just have to deal with the fact that this is gonna be a green hat. Make this a bit darker. I'm just gonna, like, you don't need to remove these because we're not gonna export any of them anyway, but I'm just gonna remove them for now. Go to this solid green, and you know the drill by now. Black mask generator. Let's do an AO for this one, just to see what's gonna happen. Let's invert the AO and distance, increase the distance. Don't need the blur. Contrast doesn't do much. No, do we need an AO for this? I guess AO just isn't very suitable for this sort of for this. Let's switch the AO to a curvature. And our curvature is going to give us a bit more of an effect like this. Now, you might notice that your curvature is really dark on certain areas, and I believe I already showed this. You could just add a paint layer over that curvature and start like removing it. Let me reduce my brush properties to lower flow. Yeah, so I'm not like totally removing it. I'm just blurring it out. A little bit. And border as well, you could do that. And you're like, oh, but this looks like a, you know, I don't like the blurry detail. Remember, I just add a blur filter, man, and it'll soften it out. And the underneath, you could probably actually add a bunch on the underneath because you want the underneath to be dark, right? You want it to be darker. This hat is a terrible color. I apologize. Let's add our blur filter and then lower the opacity. Come on, blur. Increase blur intensity. That's a bit strong. That's a bit strong. Let's add, maybe when we add the world space, it'll be better. Let's invert that. There we go. You added the world space, so it's a bit better. Let's change the color because it's, gosh, terrible. Let's start with a less chromatic, yellowish. Oh my god. This is what happens when you don't have a plan for your character. You know, when Holly's telling you, like, make sure you know what the character is and what they do and what is their job and all that stuff. Like, this is why. Because if you don't know, you're just shooting in the dark and you have no idea what you're making. Like I am doing right now. Yeah, this hat is not up to my standards. But our cardboard hat is done. But I hope the thing for the body was useful. If some of you are struggling with figuring out how to paint other aspects of your model, there are external tutorials that I can share with you, and I can make more for you to use. Now, we're not done. We're not done. I'm going to go through the whole thing. So, we've done this. I'm going to file, save this because I haven't saved it at all. Please make sure you're saving whilst you're working. I made a mistake here and I did not. So cow substance, yeah, not the best name. Now, what you want to do now is you want to go to File and Export Textures. And it's going to export textures for both of them. We're going to keep it on 1024 or 1024. This is an alright size for now. And what you want to do is you want to make sure it's on the one you're using, so PBR Spec Gloss. Or actually, no, we were using non-PBR, weren't we? Let me just make sure. Just leave it at PBR Spec Gloss, that's fine. Oh, they even have a Sketchfab one, to be honest. No, we'll leave it at PBR Spec Gloss, we don't need to mess around. Leave it at PBR Spec Gloss. It's going to export a bunch of maps you're not going to need, don't worry about that. Change this setting, Dilation Infinite, to Transparent, and reduce it to about 2. Change the location you want to save it to whatever you want to save it. Just select folder, you don't need to pick a name. And change JPEG to Targa. I believe that's all the settings we need. And just click Export. That's going to go through and export everything. And if you go to your desktop now, it's going to export all of these textures. Look at all these textures. And you don't need most of them because we're only going to be using diffuse. So I'm going to grab diffuse from, and I will grab normal map as well. So grab diffuse and grab normal, just in case. We'll play around with it and see how it looks with the normal map. Normal here. And the rest you can remove because we're not using them. I don't know what this JSON is. Alright. We have them here. Now, before I go to Sketchfab, I just want to show you. Let's go back to material. We've been on diffuse this whole time. Let's go back to material. This is what it looks like, right? It's got shininess. Is that a bad thing? No. There's ways for us to change the shininess and all that stuff. I'll even do it right now. I'll go to layers. I'll go to colors right at the bottom. And our very base color, I'm going to add a gloss. And I'm going to just reduce the glossiness. And I'm going to add a specular. And the specular is kind of the color that gets that gets reflected from the body. But this is additional information. This is information that we don't need. We want to make a stylized, solid color character following the style that we were watching, right? The style in the reference. So that's why we didn't do it. So I'm gonna save this and close this. I'm gonna exit, quit here. And we're gonna go back to Maya for a moment. And I'm gonna duplicate the substance one. And I'm just going to, I don't think there's anything particular that I need to do. Sometimes there is. Sometimes there's a difference between the substance and the export that you're gonna have. So let's grab the export now. Let's grab the, we don't need the high poly in the export, we need that in the substance. This is our export one, and now we just need to position it in a good place. So I'm gonna move the pivot point to the bottom of the feet, and I'm gonna move the model to, oops, let's hide the substance painter. I'm gonna move the model to the center of the world, right? And if you're working on a game, you'd have to change how big it is and stuff and all of that. We're not gonna do that for now. Now, I'm gonna keep the materials though, because we're gonna need those in Sketchfab. All right, so let me save this and let me grab these two, and export them, export selection on the desktop, same settings. I'm gonna call it cow Sketchfab. All right, that's gonna export it. Now, let me do two things. Let me start Sketchfab, and also let me open Photoshop to show you, thank you, to show you what those maps that we created look like. And here, let's go to Sketchfab. And let's log in. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna, where is it? 2, 3, 4. I'm gonna pause. I'll be right back. All right, did that pause? Nope. Oh, I can't pause. I don't have a pause. Okay, never mind. I'm just gonna, you're just gonna see my email, man. It's on my YouTube anyway, so it doesn't matter. All right, so let's upload. You want to click upload on Sketchfab, and you want to browse, and you want to go to your desktop, and you want to choose cow Sketchfab. Open that up, upload files, and that's gonna think. Whilst that's thinking, sometimes it takes ages, and I have no idea why. While that's thinking, I'm going to, I suppose, wait for Photoshop to start up. Why CS6? I don't know, but it's almost there. Oh, it's ready. Excellent. We don't have to wait for the other one. So it's ready, and after it's ready, you can, let's minimize that, call it WeatherCows character. So whatever it is, if it's a WeatherCows Suka Bus character, I know one of you has one of those, or like Gomez character, or whichever one you're making. And in the description, you don't need to add anything, because you're going to give me a link to this in your submission, and there'll be a separate video on how to submit and how to write the report and all of that. For now, we're just going to do this. So don't worry about that. Just give it a name. And then here at the top, you can save this, so make sure you save that. And now up here, go to View My Model. And then also go to Edit 3D Settings. So here it's not exactly Maya controls. You don't need to click the keyboard. You can just left click, middle click, and scroll wheel, right? And if you hold Alt and click, you're moving the light around, right? But that doesn't really matter for us, excuse me, because we're gonna go down here to in the settings and change it from lit to shadeless. And we're gonna get this, and you know what that is. So then we're gonna just straight away, before we edit anything else, go to materials, and we're gonna go to base color, and we're gonna click texture and import textures. And now you can import all of the textures that you're gonna use. You can open them, and you can pick the one you want, and we want this one. Okay, that didn't work. We're on the hat right now. So in materials, you can click this little drop down, and it's gonna show you which one you're working on right now. So right now we're on the clothes, not on the body. So let's go to the clothes and choose the the hat texture. There we go. So the closer is using the hat. Let's go back to the body and choose the body texture. And there you go. You have the body there. Now let's go. I don't think there's anything else we can change or need to change. You can probably add some of these additional effects if you want, like ambient occlusion. I don't know if they work, honestly, with unlit. I don't think so, but we can just leave it as it is. We don't need anything else. You could probably add emission on your character, which is glow if you have glow, but we don't have that at the moment either, and opacity as well if you have glasses or spaceship helmets or whatever. But this is it. This is literally it. You go to Sketchfab and you apply your material. This is why unlit shaders are quite interesting to use, because there's very little fiddling around after you export them. All the fiddling around is in Substance Painter. Let's make this look cooler though. Let's go to scene. Let's go to field of view. Let's leave the field of view as it is. Wireframe, we don't need to worry about the wireframe. Background. So you can choose an environment, an image, or a color. I actually would prefer to keep it at a color, and I give it a solid color and I bring it down to something like this. This is quite a bright character, so I bring it down to something not very chromatic, a little bit of color and quite dark. You could go up to a gray, but then it's quite bright, and this is a bright character. I wouldn't go anything like a bright color like this. Please, please don't. It literally reminds me of Microsoft Paint back in 2004, so please don't do that. Down here is a nice, smooth, calm colors that don't hurt your eyes. This guy's orange, so the blue works quite well with it. If it was a red character, I would probably do something like a green. So, you know, try and contrast the background a little bit and just make it chill to look at. Don't make it solid black because it looks crazy. Just, you know, something chill, something slightly colorful, quite dark and easy to look at that allows your character to come through quite clearly. Now, there are other presentation things that you can do to make the character look a bit cooler. You can create a floor. You can do some other things that I won't go into now. Try and get to this point first. And as I said, this is just the body, right? And the hat. So it's not that much. Let me make sure we're not missing anything. Lighting, we don't need because we're using unlit. Materials, we've gone through. It's just diffuse, essentially, unless you have opacity or emission. Post-processing effects, I think you can use these. Yeah, you can use post-processing. I don't recommend it. Depth of field, no. Sharpness. You can probably use some sharpness. I actually use sharpness, so you can open up sharpness. You can click on, and don't go all crazy because it looks, but just a little bit, like 0.1, 0.2. It just gives it a little bit of an edge. It might even be hard to notice on the video. Chromatic aberration, don't use that. Vignette, don't use that. Bloom, if you have glow, go for it and play with these settings a little bit. But if you don't have glow, if you don't have any like magic crystals or fire or whatever, maybe not, because right now we have this shining back of a cow, right? Maybe, you know, this is quite boring. It doesn't have any glow, so use your artistic intuition to see whether it's worth it. It does look a little nicer, a bit glowy, but it literally looks like the bum is glowing, so I'm going to take that off. Tone mapping you don't need, and color balance you don't need, because this is affecting your texture, so I would recommend not using that necessarily, and anti-aliasing you can leave off. And the rest you don't even have to touch. We're not doing animation, we're not doing the rest. That's it. Click Save View when you have a view you like, and then Save Settings, which I think just got saved anyway. I'm just going to save them again. Now, you can only publish one model per week, per month. Right? You can only publish one model per month. So don't publish anything until your model is, or at least publish just your final character. Don't publish it until you're happy with it and you think it's ready and you're ready to hand in. Because you can only publish one model a month. So yeah, do that. After you save your settings, we should take some screenshots of it. And I'm not gonna show you the tool right now because I don't have it on hand. I could do a quick Google to find it, and I think I might. So Sketchfab lab screenshot. I wonder if this is gonna come up. There we go, straight away. Okay, so this is the screenshot tool. you can load a 3D scene. You just need to put in the URL, and you don't have to have published it. I haven't published it. I've just saved settings. I'm gonna exit, and I can just use this URL. Oh my gosh, why is it like that? Okay, fix it. Oh my god, that scared me there for a second. Gosh, it's really dark, isn't it? It almost looks like a zombie cow, zombie survivor cow in an apocalypse. Anyway, it's because of the moldy cardboard hat that looks super blurry and low resolution. This is a terrible hat, I apologize. Anyway, select your URL from your viewing. So it's not published yet, but you can still select this. You can go to this labs.sketchfab.com/experiments/screenshots, load a 3D scene from URL, paste your URL, load it. It's going to load it up, right? And you can take post-process on and off. We don't have any. And it's going to default to 1920 by 1080. And you can export screenshot. So position yourself how you need it. You can export screenshot. And it's going to download it. You can click these little model inspector. You can put on your wireframe as well. Hide the model inspector, position it again, or keep it in the same position, probably better idea, and export screenshot. And you can see that it's giving you high-res screenshots, right? So this is how you can take screenshots for your thing. I do not believe you can export a turntable of it like spinning around, but that's all right because you're gonna send me the link to this model anyway. So when you publish it, you can send me the link. If you haven't published it, just send me the viewing URL and I will view it through this thing as well, right? Okay, but again, submission at a later date. That's pretty much everything. The very, very last thing I wanted to show you is what your maps look like. And as you can see, and this is very obvious, but just for the sake, here's your diffuse, body diffuse. So you can see it's following the UVs. If anyone still didn't know how UVs work, it follows your UVs. It puts the textures on top of the UVs, right? And this is how it looks like. This is just the base color. Just the base color. And this is what's unlit texturing. And here's your normal map, which we didn't use because we don't need it. This is the hat. Excellent. I think that's everything. And that's everything. That's everything for the cow up to submission. And I'm going to make separate videos for submission and for both of your briefs and for writing reports for the briefs as well. The only thing left in terms of videos is things for your furniture, which I'm going to get on to very shortly. So have a nice weekend, or whenever you're watching this. Thanks for watching. Bye. Stop recording.